What happens when the man who threw you away decides to host a party celebrating his new life? My ex-husband Mark thought he had it all: the promotion, the fancy apartment, and the younger woman on his arm. He made sure I was invited to his corporate gala just so I could witness his victory. He wanted to see me broken. He wanted me to see Chloe, the woman he left me for, dripping in jewels he said we could never afford. But he never imagined who I would bring as my plus one. He planned the perfect night to humiliate me, but he ended up orchestrating his own spectacular downfall. Stay tuned, because this isn't just a story about revenge. It's about what happens when a woman reclaims her power. The final box was taped. It was small, filled with miscellaneous items that hadn't fit anywhere else. A chipped coffee mug from our first anniversary trip to Vermont, a faded photo of us on the Brooklyn Bridge before the bitterness had settled in, and the silver fountain pen I'd given him when he got his first big promotion at Sterling Finance. I ran my finger over the engraving MH plus EH, forever. Forever had turned out to have a 5-year expiration date. My name is Elena Hartley. Or it was. Now it was just Elena Reed again, a name that felt both foreign and like a ghost from a past life. The apartment around me, our home, was cavernously empty. The clean, minimalist aesthetic I'd once loved, which Mark had always praised as my greatest design project, now just looked sterile and cold. Every echo of my footsteps on the polished hardwood floors was a reminder of the life that had been hollowed out. The end hadn't been a sudden explosion, but a slow, suffocating leak. It started with late nights at the office, the scent of a perfume that wasn't mine clinging to his suit jackets, and the way his phone was always angled away from me. Mark had become a master of deflection. When I'd questioned him, my voice trembling with a fear I couldn't hide, he'd called me paranoid, insecure, needy. "Elena, you need to find a hobby," he'd said, not even looking up from his laptop. "My work is demanding. The pressure is immense. The last thing I need when I come home is an interrogation." I had a hobby. I had a career. I was an architect, or at least I had been. I'd graduated top of my class from Columbia, my portfolio buzzing with innovative, sustainable designs. But when Mark's career at Sterling Finance began to ascend, my dreams became malleable. "Just for a few years," he'd said. "Once I make vice president, you can launch your own firm. We'll have the capital. I'll support you completely." So I'd supported him. I'd taken on small freelance projects, interior design gigs that paid the bills but starved my soul, all while managing our home, hosting his insufferable work dinners, and editing his presentations until 3 a.m. I was the silent partner in the corporation of Mark Hartley. I built the scaffolding so he could climb to the top, never realizing he was planning to kick the ladder out from under me. The woman's name was Chloe. I found out on a Tuesday. Mark had left his personal laptop open, a rare slip-up for such a meticulous man. There were hotel receipts, dinner reservations for 2 at Per Se, a place he'd always claimed was too pretentious for us, and then the photos. Chloe was 24, a recent MBA grad in his department, with wide, ambitious eyes and a smile that didn't quite reach them. In every picture she was looking at the camera, while Mark was looking at her like she was the sun. It was a look he hadn't given me in years. The confrontation was horrifically civilized. He didn't shout. He didn't even deny it. He sat on our designer sofa, the one I'd spent 2 months sourcing, and calmly explained the situation, as if he were outlining a quarterly report. "It just happened, Elena," he stated, his tone devoid of emotion. "Chloe, she understands the pressures of my world. We connect on a different level." "A different level?" I whispered the words, feeling like shards of glass in my throat. "Mark, I gave up my firm for you. We built this life together." He had the audacity to look almost pitying. "You built a beautiful home, I'll give you that. But a life, Elena, you stopped growing. You got comfortable. I need someone who challenges me, who is on the same trajectory." The divorce was swift and brutal. His lawyers argued that my contribution was non-financial. The apartment was in his name. The savings were from his bonuses. I had sacrificed my career willingly, they claimed. I was left with a fraction of what I was owed enough to rent a tiny one-bedroom apartment in Queens and feel the full crushing weight of my naivety. His last words to me as I stood by the door of our old apartment holding that final small box were the ones that would fuel the fire I didn't yet know I had inside me. He leaned against the doorframe, already wearing a new, ridiculously expensive watch. Chloe was inside. I could hear her light tinkling laughter from the kitchen. "You know Elena?" he said, his voice a low, condescending drawl. "I'm doing you a favor. This will force you to finally stand on your own 2 feet. But let's be realistic. You're 34, you've been out of the game for years. Good luck out there. You're going to need it." He closed the door, and the click of the lock sounded like a final judgment. Standing in the silent hallway, the box in my arms suddenly felt impossibly heavy. He wasn't just leaving me. He was erasing me. He had taken my past and declared my future a write-off. In that moment, staring at the polished wood of the door I had chosen, I felt a profound and terrifying emptiness. He believed I was nothing without him. The scariest part was in the silence of that empty hall. A small, treacherous part of me was afraid he might be right. My new apartment in Astoria smelled of old paint and my neighbor's curry. It was a 5th-floor walk-up, and the view from my window was a brick wall. Every morning I'd wake up to the rumble of the end train and the suffocating feeling of failure. Mark's parting words echoed in the cramped space. "You've been out of the game for years." For the first month, I let myself break. I cried until my head pounded. I replayed every mistake, every compromise, every time I'd put his needs before my own ambition. I was drowning in a sea of what-ifs. My portfolio, once a source of immense pride, sat in its leather case collecting dust under my bed. It felt like a relic from another woman's life, a woman who was bold, talented, and full of limitless potential. I didn't recognize her anymore. The turning point came not as a lightning bolt of inspiration, but as a frantic phone call from my old college roommate, Sarah Chen. Sarah was a force of nature, a journalist who had never taken no for an answer in her life. "Elena Reed, so help me God, if you are still marathoning British crime dramas in your pajamas, I am coming over there and physically dragging you into the sunlight," she'd barked through the phone. "I'm fine, Sarah." I'd lied, my voice thick with sleep. "You are not fine. You sound like you've been gargling gravel. I saw Mark's latest post on Instagram. He and Little Miss Intern are in Aspen. He's hashtagging it, #living my best life." A fresh wave of nausea hit me. I'd blocked him, but the digital ghosts of our life were everywhere. "I don't care," I said, the lie tasting bitter. "Good, because you're better than him. You were always too good for him. Now get up, take a shower, and pull out your portfolio. I have something for you." An hour later, Sarah was in my apartment, wrinkling her nose at the mess, but placing a steaming cup of coffee in my hands. She told me about a friend of a friend who had just bought a small dilapidated brownstone in Carroll Gardens, Brooklyn. He wanted to convert the ground floor into a bookstore and cafe. The budget was shoestring, the space was a nightmare, and the pay was next to nothing. "It's a charity case, basically," Sarah admitted. "But it's a blank slate, Elena. It's a blueprint." I wanted to say no. The thought of pitching myself, of facing potential rejection, was terrifying. The confident woman who could command a boardroom with her designs was buried under layers of self-doubt. Mark's voice was in my head again. "Let's be realistic." But Sarah saw the hesitation in my eyes. "Listen to me," she said, her voice softening. "He broke your heart, but you can't let him break your spirit. That is not on the table. Remember our senior project, the Sustainable Community Library? Professor Miller said it was the most innovative design he'd seen in a decade. That woman is still in there. Go find her." That night, for the first time in months, I pulled the portfolio from under my bed. I unzipped the case and spread the large format pages across my small living room floor. There they were, sketches of sweeping glass facades, intricate models of public spaces designed to foster human connection, and my thesis on repurposing urban decay into green living architecture. A spark, tiny and fragile, flickered within me. Sarah was right. That woman was still in there. The next day I met David, the brownstone owner. He was a retired English professor with kind eyes and a passion for literature. He walked me through the space, which was even worse than Sarah had described. The plumbing was ancient, the walls were crumbling, and the light was abysmal. "I know it's a lot to ask," David said apologetically. "My pension doesn't stretch very far." But as he spoke, I wasn't seeing the decay. I was seeing possibilities. I saw where a skylight could be installed to flood the space with natural light. I envisioned breaking down a non-load-bearing wall to create an open-concept flow between the cafe and the bookshelves. I saw built-in reading nooks carved into the walls using reclaimed wood from the original structure to keep costs down and honor the building's history. I spent the next 2 days working with a fervor I hadn't felt in years. I barely slept. I filled sketch pads, made 3D models on my old laptop, and created a proposal that was not just a design but a story of revival. When I presented it to David, he was speechless. He stared at the renderings, his eyes wide. "My dear girl," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've seen not what it is, but what it could be. This is more than I ever dreamed of." The pay was barely enough to cover my rent, but the project gave me something far more valuable, a purpose. I was on the construction site every day, liaising with contractors, solving problems, getting my hands dirty. I learned to negotiate with plumbers and charm electricians. I rediscovered the thrill of seeing a line on a page become a physical reality. The small bookstore, which we named the Second Chapter, was becoming my own second chapter. One brisk afternoon, about a month before the grand opening, a tall, impeccably dressed man walked into the construction site. He had silvering hair at the temples and a quiet, observant air about him. He looked completely out of place amidst the sawdust and exposed wiring. "I apologize for intruding," he said, his voice a calm, deep baritone. "I was walking by and was struck by the use of light. The new clerestory windows. That's an ingenious solution for an east-facing brownstone. Did you design this?" I wiped a smudge of drywall dust from my cheek. "I did. Elena Reed." He extended a hand. His grip was firm. "Julian Thorne, it's a pleasure. You've managed to create a sense of expansive intimacy here. It's a paradox, and it's brilliant." The name tickled my memory, but I couldn't place it. He asked me detailed questions about my material choices, my structural modifications, and my philosophy on public spaces. It wasn't small talk. It was a conversation between peers. For 20 minutes I wasn't Mark Hartley's forgotten ex-wife. I was Elena Reed, architect. As he was leaving, he handed me a simple, heavy-stock business card. "When this project is finished, Ms. Reed, I'd like you to call my office. I think you might be interested in the scale of problems we're trying to solve at Thorne Properties." He left. I stared at the card. Julian Thorne, CEO, Thorne Properties. It was like being struck by lightning. Thorne Properties was one of the biggest luxury real estate development firms in the world. They didn't just build skyscrapers, they reshaped city skylines. That evening I stood in the nearly completed bookstore. The late afternoon sun streamed through the new windows, illuminating the dust motes like dancing fairies. It was beautiful. It was mine. For the first time since Mark had closed that door, I felt a genuine, unadulterated surge of hope. Julian Thorne wasn't just offering a potential job. His validation, his simple act of seeing my work and recognizing its value, was the first brick in the foundation of my new life. Calling Julian Thorne's office felt like stepping into a different reality. The voice on the other end was crisp and professional, and I was scheduled for a meeting the following week at their headquarters, a gleaming glass tower on Park Avenue that I had often admired from a distance. Walking into the Thorne Properties lobby was an exercise in intimidation. A 20-foot waterfall cascaded down a marble wall. The air was scented with something subtle and expensive, and the art on the walls wasn't corporate kitsch, but museum-quality originals by artists like Rothko and Calder. It was a world away from the dust and debris of the Second Chapter. My confidence, so recently rebuilt, began to waver. I clutched my portfolio, the same one I'd shown David, and suddenly felt like an amateur. I was escorted to the top floor to Julian's office. It wasn't an office. It was a sanctuary. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Central Park. The furniture was a masterclass in understated elegance. Eames chairs, a solid walnut desk, and shelves filled not with awards but with books on philosophy, history, and urban planning. Julian stood to greet me, not from behind his desk but from a seating area by the window. He was dressed in a simple gray suit, but it fit him with a tailor's precision. He looked more like a university professor than a titan of industry. "Elena, thank you for coming," he said, his smile genuine. "Please have a seat. Can I get you anything, coffee, water?" His calm demeanor immediately put me at ease. There was none of the performative power play I had been used to in Mark's world. Julian didn't need to project authority, he simply inhabited it. "I visited your bookstore project again yesterday," he began after we were settled with cups of coffee. "It's finished. It's magnificent. You took a forgotten space and gave it a soul. That is a rare talent." I felt a blush creep up my neck. "Thank you. It was a passion project." "The best ones always are," he said, his gaze thoughtful. "I'm not going to waste your time with a formal interview, Elena. Your work speaks for itself. I have a proposition for you. We've recently acquired the old Vanguard building in the financial district. It's an Art Deco masterpiece, but the interiors are a mess of 90s corporate renovations. Our lead architect has a vision for the exterior restoration, but I'm looking for someone to redesign the grand atrium. It needs to be a public-private space that feels both monumental and welcoming. It needs a soul." I was stunned. The Vanguard building was an iconic landmark. A project like that wasn't just a job. It was a career-defining opportunity. "That's an incredible offer, Mr. Thorne," I stammered. "Call me Julian," he insisted. "And it's not an offer yet. It's a challenge. I'm asking 3 different architects to submit a preliminary concept. We'll provide a stipend for your time, of course. I want to see how you would approach it. I have a feeling your perspective is exactly what this project needs." For the next 2 weeks, I lived and breathed the Vanguard atrium. I spent days in the cavernous, soulless space studying the way light moved across the marble floors throughout the day. I delved into the building's history, drawing inspiration from the original 1930s Art Deco motifs. Mark and Chloe and their life in Aspen faded into a blurry background noise. My world was consumed by sightlines, material textures, and the grand, beautiful puzzle of the atrium. My concept was ambitious. Instead of a sterile corporate lobby, I envisioned a multi-level urban conservatory. I proposed a living wall that would stretch up 3 stories, a delicate suspended footbridge made of glass and steel, and a central water feature whose sound would absorb the city's noise. It was bold, expensive, and unlike anything Thorne Properties had ever done before. I was terrified they would laugh me out of the room. I presented my designs to Julian and his senior team. I spoke for an hour, my voice steady, my passion for the project overriding my nerves. I explained how every element was designed to encourage people to linger, to connect, not just pass through. When I finished, the room was silent. My heart pounded against my ribs. Then Julian began to applaud. Not a polite corporate clap, but a genuine, enthusiastic one. The rest of the board followed his lead. "Elena," he said, his eyes shining with an excitement that mirrored my own. "That is not just a design. That is a vision. The job is yours." That day marked the beginning of my true ascent. Working at Thorne Properties was like drinking from a fire hose of creativity and excellence. Julian was a demanding boss, but an incredible mentor. He challenged my ideas, pushed me to be bolder, and celebrated my successes. He saw my talent not as an accessory to a man's career, but as a powerful force in its own right. Our relationship was strictly professional, yet a deep, unspoken respect grew between us. We'd have late-night debates over blueprints, discovering a shared love for historical architecture and a similar philosophy on the social responsibility of design. He never once mentioned my personal life, and I was grateful for it. He didn't know or care about my messy divorce. He only cared about the quality of my work. One evening, we were the last two in the office reviewing the final renderings for the atrium. "You seem different from when we first met," he observed quietly, looking at me over the top of a blueprint. "I am," I admitted. "The bookstore. That project pieced me back together. This one," I said, gesturing to the plans for the Vanguard atrium, "this is making me whole again." He gave me a small, understanding smile. "Good architecture, like a good life, is about rebuilding on a solid foundation. You have a very solid foundation, Elena." It was a simple statement, but it meant the world to me. For so long, my foundation had been Mark. Now I was building my own brick by brick, blueprint by blueprint. I was no longer the ex-wife. I was the architect. And from the 60th floor of the Thorne Properties building, looking out at the glittering expanse of New York City, the view was finally breathtakingly my own. 6 months flew by in a blur of site visits, material selections, and budget meetings. The Vanguard Atrium project was a behemoth, but I felt an exhilarating sense of command. The respect I received from the engineers, contractors, and junior architects was intoxicating. They didn't know me as Mark Hartley's ex. They knew me as Ms. Reed, the woman with the unwavering eye for detail and the brilliant, audacious vision. My life had found a new rhythm. I moved out of the cramped Queens apartment and into a beautiful, light-filled studio in Brooklyn Heights with a view of the skyline I was now helping to reshape. I reconnected with old friends from Columbia, people I'd let drift away during my marriage because Mark had found them too academic. I was earning more money than I ever had, but it was the sense of self-worth that was the real currency. Occasionally I'd hear things about Mark and Chloe. Sarah, ever the diligent reporter, would pass on tidbits she'd heard through the grapevine. They had bought the apartment we used to rent, solidifying their victory. Chloe was a rising star at Sterling Finance, apparently hitching her wagon to Mark's. They were the firm's new golden couple, their social media a curated gallery of 5-star vacations, exclusive parties, and smug, smiling selfies. Each post was a carefully crafted message. We won. You lost. It used to sting. Now it was just noise. Their world seemed so small, so performative compared to the tangible steel and glass reality I was creating. The relationship between Julian and me had also evolved. Our late-night work sessions often bled into conversations about art, travel, and philosophy. I learned he was a widower, his wife having passed away from a long illness several years prior. He spoke of her with a profound, gentle respect that was a stark contrast to Mark's casual dismissal of me. He was intensely private, but possessed a deep well of empathy. There was a magnetic pull between us, an intellectual and emotional chemistry that hummed just beneath the surface of our professional collaboration. But neither of us crossed that line. The work was too important and the unspoken respect too precious. One Monday morning, an unusual email arrived. It was from Mark's assistant at Sterling Finance. The subject line read, "Invitation, the Sterling Finance Annual Gala." My first instinct was to delete it. Why on earth would I be invited to my ex-husband's corporate gala? It had to be a mistake. But then I saw the personalized note at the bottom. Elena, I know it's been a while, but I wanted to make sure you received an invitation to the gala. It's a big night for me. I'm receiving the Advisor of the Year award and being officially announced as the new Senior Vice President. I thought you might want to be there to see it. It would be good for you to get out and network. +1 is welcome, of course. Best, Mark. The condescension dripped from every word. It would be good for you to get out. Network. This wasn't an olive branch. It was a gauntlet. He wasn't inviting me to celebrate. He was summoning me to witness his triumph. He wanted to parade his success, his new title, and his new woman in front of the woman he'd discarded. He was painting a picture of my lonely, pathetic life where an invitation to his party would be the highlight of my year. He wanted me to see everything I had lost. A year ago, this email would have shattered me. It would have sent me into a spiral of tears and Ben & Jerry's. But as I sat in my spacious office, the blueprints for my multi-million-dollar project spread across my desk. I didn't feel hurt. I felt a cold, clear surge of anger. The sheer arrogance of it was breathtaking. He had no idea what my life was like now. In his mind, I was still the broken woman he'd left in that empty apartment, probably designing shabby kitchens for a pittance. The thought was so galling, so utterly dismissive, that it sparked a new, unfamiliar feeling: defiance. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the invitation on my screen. My finger hovered over the delete button. That was the smart, mature thing to do. Ignore it. Rise above. But then I thought of his final words to me. Good luck out there. You're going to need it. He had written the end to our story. He had cast himself as the victor, and me as the vanquished. And he had never, not for 1 second, considered that I might be capable of writing a new chapter for myself. A slow smile spread across my face. Yeah. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of an architect who just figured out the solution to a very complex structural problem. He wanted a witness. Fine, I would go to his gala. But I wouldn't be going as the ghost of his past. I would be going as Elena Reed, the architect of her own future. And I knew exactly who I wanted to ask as my +1. Later that day, I found Julian reviewing a zoning report. I took a deep breath. Julian, I started, my voice a little shakier than I wanted. I have a strange favor to ask. Are you by any chance free on the evening of November 15th? He looked up, his brow furrowed in curiosity. I believe I am. Why? I've been invited to a corporate awards gala, I said, trying to sound casual. And I need a +1. It's black tie. I know it's not your usual scene, but it would mean a lot to me if you would come. He studied my face for a long moment, his gaze perceptive. He could see there was more to this than just a simple invitation. He didn't press for details. He simply nodded. I'd be honored, Elena. Who is the host? I allowed myself that small, defiant smile again. Sterling Finance. A flicker of recognition crossed his face. Thorne Properties was a major player in global markets. Of course he knew the firm. He didn't ask any more questions. Very well, he said, returning to his report. Send me the details. I'll clear my schedule. As I walked back to my office, my heart was hammering. The game was on. Mark wanted to show me his world. He had no idea I was about to show him mine. The week leading up to the gala was a whirlwind. My work on the Vanguard atrium had reached a critical phase demanding my full attention. The distraction was a blessing, keeping my mind off the impending confrontation. I didn't tell Julian the full story behind the invitation. I was too proud. I didn't want him to see me as a woman scorned, seeking petty revenge. I simply wanted to attend the event with a man I deeply respected on my own terms. The night of the gala, a nervous energy thrummed through me. This wasn't just about Mark anymore. It was about closing a chapter, about proving to myself that the power he once held over me was well and truly gone. I had spent a scandalous amount of money on a dress. It was a deep emerald green silk gown by a designer I'd long admired, Roland Mouret. It was elegant and understated, but it fit me perfectly, a silent testament to the new confidence I wore like a second skin. My hair was swept up in a sophisticated chignon, and the only jewelry I wore was a pair of simple diamond earrings, a gift to myself when I'd signed the Vanguard contract. As I looked at my reflection, I saw not a trace of the heartbroken woman who had moved to Queens. I saw a stranger, but a stranger I was finally proud to be. At precisely 7 p.m., the buzzer rang. My heart leaped into my throat. When I opened the door, Julian was standing there, and for a moment I forgot how to breathe. I had only ever seen him in business suits or casual weekend attire at the office. In a perfectly tailored tuxedo, he was devastatingly handsome. He looked like he belonged on a movie screen, not in the hallway of my Brooklyn apartment building. His eyes swept over me, and a slow, appreciative smile touched his lips. "Elena," he said, his voice a low murmur. "You look absolutely stunning. You're not so bad yourself, Mr. Thorne. I replied, my voice a little breathless. Julian, he corrected gently. He offered me his arm. Shall we? The ride to the Pierre Hotel where the gala was being held was quiet. The city lights streaked past the windows of Julian's private car. I could feel his presence beside me, a solid, calming force. He didn't pry or ask why I was so tense. He simply offered a comfortable silence for which I was immensely grateful. As we pulled up to the grand entrance, I saw them. Mark and Chloe were posing for the event photographer on the red carpet. Mark was preening in his tuxedo, his arm wrapped possessively around Chloe's waist. She was wearing a flamboyant fire engine red dress covered in sequins, a dress designed to scream, "Look at me." They looked like a power couple, a perfect image of success and ambition. A year ago, that sight would have crippled me. Tonight, I just saw two people trying very, very hard. Are you ready? Julian asked softly, his hand resting lightly on my arm. I took a deep breath, meeting his gaze in the dim light of the car. I am. We bypassed the red carpet and entered through the main doors. The ballroom was a sea of black ties and designer gowns. A string quartet played softly and waiters weaved through the crowd with trays of champagne. The air buzzed with the self-important chatter of the financial elite. It was Mark's kingdom. We hadn't been in the room for more than 5 minutes when I saw him spot me. Mark was holding court with a group of his colleagues, a champagne flute in his hand. His eyes scanned the room, and for a second they passed right over me. Then he did a double take. His smile froze. His eyes widened, first in disbelief, then in a flash of something I couldn't quite decipher. Annoyance, jealousy. He excused himself from his group and began to walk towards us, a predatory gleam in his eye. Chloe trailed behind him, her expression a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. The moment I had been simultaneously dreading and anticipating was here. Well, Elena, Mark said, his voice oozing false charm. He let his eyes travel down my dress and back up, a flicker of surprise in his expression before he masked it with a smirk. I have to say I'm surprised you came, and you cleaned up nicely. The condescension was so familiar it was almost comforting. Hello, Mark, I said, my voice even and calm. I refused to let him see any weakness. His gaze shifted to Julian, dismissing him as an irrelevant accessory. I don't believe we've met, he said, extending a hand to Julian but looking at me. Mark Hartley. I'm Elena's ex-husband. He emphasized the ex as if it were a brand of failure. Julian took his hand, his grip firm and steady. Julian Thorne. Mark's smug expression didn't change. The name clearly meant nothing to him. He was too insulated in his own world of stocks and bonds to recognize a name that commanded respect in global real estate and beyond. Right, Mark said dismissively, turning his attention back to me. So this is who you're dating now, trying to get back out there, huh? Good for you. Before I could respond, Chloe stepped forward, linking her arm through Mark's. She gave me a saccharine sweet smile that didn't reach her cold, calculating eyes. It's so lovely to finally meet you, Elena, she chirped. Mark has told me, well, he's mentioned you. I'm Chloe. It's so brave of you to come tonight. This must be a little awkward. Every word was a perfectly sharpened dart. Brave, awkward. She was painting me as the pathetic ex crashing the party of her replacement. Mark beamed, pulling her closer. Chloe has been an incredible support. We're celebrating my promotion to senior VP tonight. It's a big step. Finally have a partner who is on the same page, you know, he said, aiming the comment directly at me. This was the moment, the grand humiliation he had planned. He stood there flanked by his beautiful young mistress, gloating about his success, expecting me to crumble. He expected me to look at the floor to make an excuse and leave to give him the satisfaction of knowing he had broken me. I held his gaze. I didn't flinch. I felt Julian's steady presence beside me, a silent anchor. Congratulations on the promotion, Mark, I said, my voice as cool as ice. It sounds like you've done very well for yourself. He smirked, thinking he had won. The best I've ever been, he said. Things have a way of working out for the best, don't they? The air crackled with tension. This was his checkmate. He was standing there, king of his gilded cage, waiting for me to concede the game. But what Mark didn't realize, what he couldn't possibly comprehend, was that I wasn't even playing his game anymore. I was in a different league entirely, and the main event was about to begin. Just as Mark was basking in the glow of his perceived victory, a distinguished older man with a booming voice approached our small group. I recognized him instantly from the financial news. Richard Davies, the CEO of Sterling Finance. He was the undisputed king of this castle, a man whose presence caused an immediate shift in the room's energy. "Mark, there you are," Davies bellowed, clapping Mark on the shoulder a little too hard. "Great night, my boy, great night." Mark's posture immediately changed. He stood taller, his chest puffed out, a sycophantic smile plastered on his face. "Mr. Davies, thank you for everything. This night is incredible." He gestured towards Chloe. "You remember Chloe from my team." Davies gave her a cursory nod, his attention already elsewhere. His eyes scanned past me and landed on Julian. And then the world tilted on its axis. The CEO's entire demeanor transformed. The bluff, hearty persona vanished, replaced by one of genuine, almost reverential respect. A look of utter shock crossed his face, followed by a wide, disbelieving grin. "Mr. Thorne," Davies said, his voice a full octave higher than before. "Julian Thorne. My God, is that really you? What on earth are you doing at one of our dull little soirees?" He elbowed Mark roughly in the ribs, all but shoving him out of the way to shake Julian's hand with both of his. "Richard Davies, CEO of Sterling. We've never been formally introduced, but I'm a tremendous admirer of your work. The Thorne Tower in Shanghai is a masterpiece. My team has been trying to get a meeting with your people for 6 months. Mark's face went slack. The smug smirk dissolved, replaced by a mask of stunned confusion. He looked from his boss, who was now fawning over my date, to Julian, as if seeing him for the first time. The cogs were turning in his head slowly, painfully. Thorne, Julian Thorne. Thorne Properties. Julian was the picture of grace. "Richard, a pleasure," he said smoothly, shaking Davies' hand. "I don't get out to these events often, but my partner for the evening insisted." He gestured warmly towards me. "I believe you know Elena Reed." Now it was Davies' turn to look confused. He glanced at me, then back at Mark. "Reed? Wait. Hartley's ex-wife, I thought." Mark, seeing his moment to reclaim control, jumped in. "Yes, this is Elena," he said quickly, trying to frame me as his appendage. "She's my ex. We're still friends, of course." But before he could continue his pathetic attempt at spin, Davies' eyes lit up with a different kind of recognition. He snapped his fingers. "Reed, Elena Reed. Of course I saw your feature in Architectural Digest last month," he exclaimed, his voice booming across the immediate area, drawing the attention of several nearby guests. "The Vanguard project, the urban conservatory concept. Absolutely brilliant. We have a holding in that building, and what you're doing with the atrium is revolutionary. You're the talk of the real estate world right now." If Mark's face had been slack with confusion before, it was now a deathly pale white. It was the color of utter soul-crushing shock. He stared at me as if I were a complete stranger who had just materialized out of thin air. The narrative he had so carefully constructed, the lonely, struggling ex-wife he'd magnanimously invited to his party, wasn't just crumbling. It was being vaporized before his very eyes. Chloe's reaction was even more telling. Her perfectly painted smile vanished. Her eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, darted from the fawning CEO to the globally renowned billionaire who was my date, and then to me, the woman she had dismissed as a piece of ancient history. I could almost see the abacus in her head clicking away as she furiously reevaluated the social and financial capital of the man whose arm she was holding. She took a subtle step away from Mark. It was a tiny movement, but in the charged silence it felt like a seismic shift. Davies, oblivious to the personal drama unfolding, continued to gush. "So you two are together," he said, beaming at Julian and me. "A true power couple. The visionary and the builder. I love it." He then turned back to Mark, his tone shifting back to that of a boss addressing a subordinate. Hartley, why didn't you tell me you knew Elena Reed, the architect behind the Vanguard project? And for God's sake, why didn't you tell me you could get me an introduction to Julian Thorne? We've been chasing an investment from his firm for the new Asia fund. Mark opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked like a fish gasping for air. All the blood had drained from his face. In a single devastating 5-minute exchange, his entire reality had been dismantled. He had brought me here to be a prop in his success story, only to discover that he was a footnote in mine. He wanted to show off his promotion and his trophy girlfriend, only to be utterly overshadowed by his has-been ex-wife and her billionaire partner in front of the one man whose opinion mattered most to his career. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw genuine fear in his eyes. It was the fear of a small man who had just realized he was swimming in an ocean far too deep for him. The superiority, the condescension, the pity, it was all gone, replaced by the raw, ugly terror of public humiliation. Julian, sensing the moment had reached its peak, placed a light hand on the small of my back. "Richard, it was a pleasure to meet you," he said smoothly, extricating us from the situation. "But if you'll excuse us, I believe they are about to begin the awards presentation. We should find our table." As we walked away, leaving Mark and Chloe standing there in the wreckage, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel the weight of his stare on my back. I could feel the palpable silence he had left in his wake. He had built his new life on a foundation of arrogance and deceit, a glass house from which to look down on me. And I had just watched it shatter into a million pieces. We found our table, which by some stroke of cosmic irony had a perfect view of the stage. The awards ceremony began, and when Mark's name was called for Advisor of the Year, the applause felt thin and obligatory. As he walked to the stage, he looked dazed. His confident stride was gone, replaced by the hesitant shuffle of a man who had just been publicly undressed. He accepted the glass trophy, mumbled a few incoherent words of thanks into the microphone, a far cry from the gloating, triumphant speech I was sure he had prepared, and scurried back to his seat, avoiding eye contact with everyone, especially his own boss. He was a ghost at his own celebration. Julian and I didn't stay for the whole event. We left shortly after Mark's award, slipping out quietly into the cool November night. The silence in the car on the way back to my apartment was different this time. It wasn't tense. It was peaceful. It was the calm after a storm. As the car pulled up outside my building, I turned to him. "Thank you, Julian," I said, my voice filled with a sincerity that went far beyond mere gratitude for being my escort. "Thank you for tonight." "You have nothing to thank me for, Elena," he replied, his gaze warm and steady. "You did that all on your own. I was just proud to be there to see it." He walked me to my door. Under the soft light of the hallway, the professional line that had existed between us for months finally seemed to fade away. He reached out and gently brushed a stray strand of hair from my face, his fingers lingering for a moment on my cheek. "He never saw you, did he?" Julian said softly. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. "He looked at you, but he never truly saw the brilliant woman standing in front of him." Tears pricked my eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness or anger. They were tears of release. "No," I whispered. "He didn't." "His loss," Julian said simply. He leaned in and pressed a soft, chaste kiss to my forehead. "Good night, Elena." "Good night, Julian." As I closed the door and leaned against it, I finally allowed myself to feel the full impact of the evening. It wasn't the petty thrill of revenge that filled me. It was a profound sense of closure. Mark's power over me, the little voice in my head that whispered his criticisms and judgments, was gone. It had been silenced not by my anger, but by my success. My revenge wasn't the scene at the party. It was the life I had built. It was the Vanguard atrium. It was the respect of my peers. It was the quiet dignity with which I now carried myself. The next morning I received a single pathetic text message from Mark. "I don't know what games you're playing, but you made me look like a fool." I stared at the message, and for the first time I felt nothing but a distant pity for him. He still didn't get it. He still thought it was about him. I typed back a simple reply. No, Mark. You did that all on your own. Then I blocked his number and deleted the conversation. A few weeks later, Sarah called me, bursting with gossip. Mark had been sidelined at Sterling Finance. His promotion to senior VP was indefinitely postponed after the disastrous gala. Chloe, seeing the writing on the wall, had dumped him and transferred to the firm's London office. He had put the apartment up for sale. His perfect life, the one he had so proudly flaunted, had imploded. I listened, but the news didn't bring me joy. It was just an epilogue to a book I had long since finished reading. My story was still being written. The Vanguard atrium opened to rave reviews, cementing my reputation as one of the most exciting new architectural voices in the city. Julian and I began spending time together outside of work, our relationship slowly and beautifully blossoming from a foundation of mutual respect into something deeper, something real. One sunny afternoon, Julian took me to the top of the newly opened Vanguard building to a private terrace overlooking the city. We stood there side by side, looking out at the sprawling metropolis below. The wind whipped through my hair, and I felt a sense of peace I had never known. From this high up, the world looked different. The bustling streets, the endless traffic, the grand old buildings, and the gleaming new ones. It was all part of a vast, intricate design. Down there somewhere was the empty apartment Mark had left me in. Down there was the little bookstore where I had found myself again. Down there was the man who thought my world had ended when he walked out of it. But I wasn't down there anymore. I was up here. And from the top, the view wasn't just beautiful, it was infinite. Thank you so much for listening to Elena's story. It's a powerful reminder that our lowest moments can often become the foundation for our greatest triumphs. The end of one chapter is not the end of the book. For anyone out there who has ever been made to feel small, who has been told they aren't enough, or who is currently trying to rebuild their life from the ground up, remember, your worth is not determined by someone else's inability to see it. Your strength, your talent, and your resilience are yours alone. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button to let us know. Share it with someone who might need to hear this message today. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next real-life story of struggle, resilience, and ultimate triumph. What did you think of Mark's downfall? Let us know in the comments below.